taking on the Homeowners Association president. This incident took place shortly after my wife and I got married. My grandfather had passed away just a few months prior, leaving me a significant inheritance along with a note advising me to use the funds wisely to build a prosperous life for my wife and me. My father-in-law owns a real estate company that specializes in purchasing foreclosed homes, renovating them, and he was aware of a wonderful starter home available for my wife and me. He agreed to cover the costs for the renovations with the understanding that we would repay him once we were more settled, or after 2 years in the event that we sold the house. We purchased the property, and it took approximately 90 days to complete the renovations before we moved in, which is a detail that becomes vital later on. After we finally moved into our home, we had been living there for about 2 weeks when someone knocked on our door. This individual identified himself as the president of the Homeowners Association (HOA) and asked for my landlord's contact information. I explained that we were not renting the house and that we were the homeowners. He then insisted on speaking with my parents. I reiterated that I was the homeowner and inquired about the purpose of his visit. He explained that there was an HOA for our neighborhood and that I was required to sign the HOA rules. Additionally, I owed $90 in pro-rated dues, but he offered me 30 days to pay as a courtesy, insisting that I sign the rules immediately. I asked to read and review them prior to signing anything, but they were insistent that I sign right away. I refused, and they informed me that I had 7 days to sign the document, warning that they had the legal authority to impose fines if I did not submit a signed copy within that time frame. Unsure of how to handle the situation, I called my in-laws for advice. My father-in-law became upset, stating that such information should have been disclosed before the sale, noting that sometimes this oversight occurs with HUD properties. We concluded that the $30 monthly fee was not excessive, especially since they provided a nice playground for the community. Thus, I signed the rules despite a few that seemed excessive to me, as I believed I had no real alternative. Things went relatively smoothly until about a month later when we hosted a small housewarming party with a few friends. There were fewer than 8 people present, including my wife and me. While enjoying our time on the back deck with a fire pit donated by a friend, I heard someone knocking at the door. It was more like pounding, akin to what one might expect from law enforcement. I moved around the house to find the HOA president standing there, his car parked in front of my house, complete with a yellow police light on top. Yes, I am serious. When I asked how I could assist him, he sternly informed me that we were in violation of HOA rules for holding a party outside of permitted hours, a 10 p.m. curfew, and insisted that I send my friends home or take the gathering inside quietly. I checked my watch and saw that it was only 10:05 p.m. Astonished, we took the party inside anyway. The very next day, I received a letter from the HOA notifying me that I was officially warned for violating HOA rules by hosting what they termed a wild bonfire that posed a safety hazard while drinking, despite the fact that I hadn't consumed any alcohol. I dismissed it as a minor issue. Fast forward 6 to 9 months. We were hosting a teen group devotional for our church one afternoon, and the kids were playing football in the street. Our street had virtually no traffic, and only 2 houses ours and the neighbors across the street, whose children were also involved in the game. Suddenly, I heard a police siren and saw the yellow lights flashing. The HOA president arrived and ordered us to disperse immediately, claiming it was a safety hazard since one of the kids could be injured. Frustrated, I pointed out that we had been attentive to traffic and that he was literally the first car we had seen in over an hour. He insisted, asking what would happen if an ambulance or police vehicle needed to use the street to save someone's life, even though both streets connecting to ours had access to the main road. Eventually, I relented, and we went inside. The following day, I received a letter informing me that I was fined $60, the maximum for a first offense, and that I could protest the fine at the next HOA meeting. I was determined to contest the fine, but noticed that payment was due in 30 days, while the next HOA meeting was scheduled for 35 days later. I decided to postpone payment until after the hearing and wrote a letter to the HOA president indicating as much. When I attended the meeting, it was only myself, the HOA president, the HOA secretary, his wife, the vice president, his neighbor, and the treasurer, the vice president's wife. My protest was promptly overruled, and I was also charged a $30 late fee for not paying on time, despite having informed him. I was exasperated and felt I had no recourse. A few months later, we welcomed our first child, and about a month after her birth, I was driving home one night after working a second job in retail. A buddy of mine in the military called to congratulate me on the birth of my daughter since he had been deployed. At home, I didn't want to wake my sleeping newborn, so I sat in my car with the engine running to keep warm. After about 30 minutes, I was startled by a police siren and once again saw the yellow lights. Keep in mind that police sirens are loud, and this was happening right in front of my house. His flashing light illuminated my daughter's bedroom. I stepped out of the car and rudely told him to turn off the light so as not to wake her. He stated that I appeared suspicious sitting in a running car outside my home, and despite my explanation of the situation, he insisted I needed to go inside, citing my history as a troublemaker that wouldn't earn me any leniency. I firmly told him where he could go and sat on the hood of my car. He remained next to me for another 15 minutes, insisting I needed to go inside, even touching my shoulder at one point. I warned him that if he touched me again, I would take it as an act of aggression and defend myself, prompting him to retreat to his car and leave. He circled the block 4 times in the next 30 minutes, but eventually, I grew too cold and went inside. The next day, I received a hand-delivered letter from him and the vice president, asking me to step outside to discuss the previous night's incident. He claimed he had been nice by not calling the police after I threatened him, but I interrupted him and demanded he leave my property, or I would call the police for trespassing. I read the letter, detailing 2 fines of $180 each, which were the maximum amounts, one for violating the curfew and another for disobeying the night watchman. I had reached my limit. Here comes the revenge. I began researching HOA laws and regulations regarding fines and the protest process, feeling this was a clear case of abuse. I discovered that the law mandated homeowners be notified of an HOA at least 10 days before closing on a house, and that they must receive the HOA rules within 45 days of purchase. Otherwise, they cannot be compelled to participate in the HOA. I recalled that we hadn't received this documentation until nearly 90 days after moving in, prompting me to contact my real estate agent, a close family friend who had worked with my in-laws for decades. She confirmed that she could provide me with a copy of the necessary paperwork. Upon reviewing it, I found that notification had occurred over 90 days post-purchase, and crucially, there was no disclosure statement provided at closing. My realtor speculated that she must have misplaced it as it's mandated by law, and she would never overlook such a requirement, since it is part of the title inspection process. She conducted further research and called me back 2 days later, revealing that the neighborhood did not have a registered HOA with the city or county, which is a legal requirement. I proceeded to contact the county office responsible for registrations, providing the neighborhood name. They informed me that our HOA was registered with a different city, requiring potential new HOA formations to follow specific steps. Ironically, our neighborhood had been entirely within one city until the redistricting split it in half. The other half maintained their registered HOA, while our president neglected to fulfill the necessary registration process with the state. Instead of confronting the president directly, I decided to approach the situation strategically. I spoke with my neighbor across the street, who shared my disdain for the HOA, and informed him of what I had discovered. He was furious, and together, we gathered a group of around 10 neighbors who unanimously agreed to attend the next HOA meeting. Word spread, leading to a turnout exceeding the library's capacity. I requested to address the group, and while the president attempted to prevent me from speaking due to my overdue fines approximately 3 weeks late, and now over $500 in total, I went ahead anyway. I informed them that I had consulted my in-laws attorney, another close family friend, who had drafted a lawsuit due to the HOA's impersonation of a registered organization for the purpose of collecting funds, constituting fraud. The president dismissed me and claimed I knew nothing of the matter, angrily exiting along with his staff while the rest of us remained to converse. A month later, we formally served the HOA with a lawsuit, filed by myself and 20 other homeowners, for all fines and dues we had paid, totaling around $50,000 since some families had lived there for over a decade. The president and vice president hired their own attorney in a desperate attempt to legitimize the HOA, but that required signatures from 90 homeowners. They were able to secure 3 signatures, including their own and one from another discontented resident. Following this failure, they sought a settlement by agreeing to abolish the HOA, claiming they had not personally profited from it and that all funds had been used for park maintenance, snow removal, and community events. We held a vote, which overwhelmingly rejected their proposal, much to my surprise as I had voted in favor of it. Then, about a week later, another family reached out regarding park maintenance and snow removal. It turned out the president had previously solicited a landscaping quote for the park's upkeep and had discovered that the vice president's son was being compensated significantly more than average for these services. Ultimately, the matter reached court, where the judge reviewed the evidence and ordered the HOA to pay $21,000, $1,000 per homeowner, in addition to attorney and court fees, totaling around $23,000 in damages. Furthermore, the HOA faced a fine from the city's governing body after being reported, the amount of which remains unknown to me. We sold our house the following summer, but I later learned from friends still residing in the neighborhood that both the president and vice president sold their homes and moved away due to universal disdain from the residents. They had since established an informal HOA that accepted donations for park maintenance. In summary, a disgruntled old man fabricated a non-existent HOA to exert control, neglecting to register it after the city boundaries shifted. I ultimately sued him alongside 20 other homeowners for fraud. Edit: I appreciate the gold and silver, kind strangers. Edit 2, double gold, thank you. Story 2. Is it worth trying to work through this relationship? 20F and 26M. I have been in a relationship, 20F with my boyfriend, 26M for 8 months, somewhat long distance. Since our first date, we have been very attached to each other. The relationship progressed rapidly, and although I initially believed it wasn't an issue because I felt I had met my soulmate, I now have regrets. For several months, I have been experiencing serious doubts about whether I can envision a future with him. However, I cannot determine if this stems from me being excessively critical or if we are genuinely incompatible. The concerns I have been contemplating include 1. Our personalities and interests. One of the most significant factors is our stark differences. While some couples thrive despite vast differences, it seems we might be too dissimilar. He is a bodybuilder, dedicating much of his time to the gym 5 times a week. Before I met him, I was not physically fit at all, though he inspired me to get into working out a few times a week. To him, the gym is like a sacred place. Additionally, his main hobbies revolve around video games, and the shooting range he has a strong passion for firearms. In contrast, I have a deep appreciation for the arts and enjoy educational pursuits such as reading, art, music, and film. I revel in nuanced discussions and hidden meanings, and I tend to be quite emotional, responding intensely to various stimuli, not just sad events. I consider myself to be a highly sensitive individual. Though I recognize that hobbies can be pursued separately, it feels like we struggle to connect when engaging in activities together due to our differing interests and the distinct ways we enjoy them. 2. His method of expressing love. He adores me deeply. There is no doubt in my mind regarding his commitment. He expresses his love daily and demonstrates unwavering loyalty. We connect through FaceTime almost all day, barring work or other obligations, which suits me as I am also quite clingy. Nevertheless, I often perceive his expressions of affection as superficial. He does not seem to invest deep thought into how to convey his love for me. For example, I urged him to compile a list of gift ideas for Christmas over a span of 6 months, noting things I desired, yet he failed to purchase even a single item I mentioned. Though he gifted me various items, they tended to be rather trivial fluffy socks, a couple of necklaces, candy, random cosmetics, a snow scraper, and perhaps the least thoughtful, a waffle maker, followed by a comment about me making waffles for him when he visits. He later claimed it was meant to be humorous, but I am uncertain. 3. I seem to do most of the work in the relationship. This situation does not stem from his lack of effort, but but rather from the belief that he may lack the knowledge or skills to contribute effectively. I have assisted him in his job search, helping to edit his resumes and correct mistakes. I arrange every detail of our dates, including reservations, transportation, venues, and schedules. He tends to arrive late to events, which is simply a characteristic of himself and his family, and it drives me crazy. When we argue, it often feels like I must gently guide him through the conflict, which leads to my next point. 4. His style of arguing. We go through phases where we argue frequently about inconsequential matters, usually stemming from miscommunication. However, I feel he possesses a prideful stance regarding his opinions, particularly about politics. Although we share similar political beliefs, he holds certain strongly opinionated views on conspiracy theories that he adamantly refuses to reconsider. Once he adopts a belief, he isn't willing to entertain alternate perspectives. He has said, "You don't hold a different opinion, you are just believing a lie. You are choosing to ignore the truth." He often tells me that I am blind and choosing to remain ignorant. In order to resolve or to escalate the conversation, I find myself agreeing with him or conceding that he may be correct, or admitting that I lack knowledge. Additionally, he has a poor temper, which I understand is rooted in some difficult experiences from his childhood. While I can empathize to some extent, when he becomes angry during arguments, he can be somewhat unkind. He does not resort to name-calling or cursing at me, but he can forget the respect that should accompany our relationship, becoming cold and harsh. While I never fear that he would become physically violent, there are times when he has gaslighted me during these intense discussions. 5. He demanded that I promise to erase all memories of past relationships. At the beginning of our relationship, he asked me to agree that we had never dated anyone before each other. I made a commitment that I had no exes even though I do, that I lost my virginity to him, despite that not being true, and that I had never had a crush before him. I typically do not discuss my past relationships, as I believe they are behind us for a reason, with no justification for rehashing them. Nevertheless, pretending that we have never had romantic feelings for others before our meeting feels absurd. I disliked this condition from the start, but it was a deal-breaker for him, and it seemed trivial to end the relationship over. Hence, I have chosen to accept it, recognizing that addressing it would not end well. One major issue arose approximately a month into our relationship when I confided in him about my past struggles with depression. He reacted with intense anger, requesting I never mention it again since he detested the idea of someone having mistreated me, and he was particularly offended that someone else had accessed what he wishes to wait for. We are both Christians and choose to abstain from intimacy until marriage. When I brought it up again a month later, because I disapproved of his initial reaction, he expressed that he did not want to date someone with my experiences, treating it as if I had been damaged goods, as if I had chosen that path for myself. That conversation ended with me asserting that his perspective was disrespectful, and that I could not tolerate it. I told him that I would not remain in a relationship if he could not acknowledge what had happened to me with compassion. He accepted my stance, but since then, I have refrained from raising the topic again, fearing his anger and the potential for another painful discussion. Whenever I mention any male figure from my past, he feels compelled to ask, "You were just friends, right? You weren't interested in him. You never dated. You never hooked up, right?" And I know the best approach is to answer in the negative to prevent a potential outburst. 6. His judgment and pride. As a bodybuilder, he is exceptionally fit and health-conscious. In contrast, I am more average, a bit on the heavier side, but not seriously overweight. He asserts that he loves me unconditionally and does not mind whether I choose to lose weight. However, his commentary about overweight individuals is concerning. While he does not treat them differently or berate them outright, if someone annoys him in another context and happens to be overweight, he does not hesitate to ridicule their weight. This double standard particularly applies to women. If an overweight woman cuts him off in traffic, he may resort to derogatory terms. He rationalizes this behavior, claiming that he treats people with respect to their faces. Moreover, he has a dark sense of humor that makes me uncomfortable. He often jokes about sensitive topics, including racism and other divisive issues. Although he is a man of color, his humor is disconcerting to me, and it makes me question the values he would instill in his future children, leading me to wonder if I truly want to be involved in that. If you find yourself asking, why haven't you left him if you are this unhappy? The truth is, I am uncertain about my feelings. I am unclear if this is merely a phase because the initial 5 months were relatively smooth, and I accepted him for who he is. I acknowledge that no one is perfect. He seems to be making an effort to manage his temper and improve in certain areas. While he has recognized these concerns, after 8 months, they continue to significantly affect me almost daily. As I mentioned earlier, he loves me deeply, protects me, and I feel physically safe with him in public. He would go to great lengths for me, including moving out of his hometown to be with me. When things are positive, they are fantastic, but increasingly, I find myself questioning our future. Furthermore, he is nearing the point of moving in with me, and I am uncertain whether this would resolve our issues or complicate them further. We typically see each other about 3 times a month due to living an hour apart and lacking reliable transportation. If he were to move in, could we work through these challenges? Is it worth attempting to push through the difficulties? Please let me know if I am being overly critical or if there are aspects of pride I might not be aware of. I love him dearly and wish for our relationship to work, but I am growing weary from the strain it places on me. I understand that this post is quite comprehensive and lengthy, but I felt that providing this level of detail was essential. Any advice or insight would be greatly appreciated. Story 3. Locked my air fryer away after repeated messes from roommates, only to be ostracized and eating in my room. What a nightmare. Hello, I am a 19-year-old female living with 3 other girls, all either 18 or 19 years old. Initially, when we began living together last summer with a different roommate, things were manageable. However, I was occasionally compelled to leave my room and join activities in the recreation area, as I was told that I should have completed my work earlier, or that I can simply do it later. For some context, I am pursuing a degree in computer engineering, while one of my roommates is majoring in communications and aspires to be a newscaster. Another is studying theater, and the last one is involved in sports medicine, I believe. In my view, falling behind in my introductory classes would lead to detrimental habits in my engineering courses, which are far more challenging than what my roommates encounter, so I preferred not to do it later. During the summer, I was even labeled a hermit. Moving into late summer, we met our new roommate for fall, and one of my roommates began disparaging her, calling her derogatory names and making negative comments solely because she wanted to meet at the campus Starbucks. Fast forward to the fall semester, everything started off smoothly until they began to make new friends. One of these new friends is a 24-year-old male, whom we will refer to as F, and another male, whom we will call U, is approximately 22 years old. F and U frequently visited our dormitory, often coming over to shower after playing volleyball, even though there is a wash-off station available at the court and their residence is not far away. I also discovered men's underwear in the hallways after their visits, which my roommates simply disregarded. My discomfort escalated when they began bringing alcohol into our living space, since all of my roommates are excessively fond of drinking. They even paid our previous roommate's sister to supply them with alcoholic beverages. Their loud, intoxicated friends were often present, which I expressed made me uncomfortable, and this continued until as late as 2 a.m. for consecutive days. The significant conflict arose when I requested that they clean my air fryer. For additional context, my roommates have never held jobs, and their parents entirely fund their expenses. I have been working voluntarily since I was 16 because I found it hard to see my parents purchasing everything for me and my siblings. Given the high costs, though we could afford it, I still felt guilty. I used my earnings for personal expenses to bother them less, and during my senior year of high school, I saved money to buy dorm supplies, including an air fryer. The only items I didn't buy were a mini fridge that my father purchased for me and my sister's old microwave. I simply requested that my roommates clean my items after using them, out of respect, since I personally purchased everything. 2 of my roommates are incredibly careless with their finances, spending $100 combined on inexpensive plastic Halloween decorations, while complaining about their lack of funds or pleading with their parents for $7 to contribute towards a couch sheet. After asking them to clean my air fryer about 4 times, I became frustrated and stated something like, "Can whoever used my air fryer last please clean it, or I may have to move it to my room," only to receive responses of, "I have never used it," from each of them. I actually witnessed who used it, so her dishonesty was very frustrating. Consequently, while they were in class, I cleaned the air fryer and relocated all of my items to my bedroom, locking the door. I received an angry text about having to purchase my own kitchen towels, among other items that their parents looked after. I curtly replied, "I already did," as, unlike them, I had a job and my parents supporting me. This appeared to upset them, as after a few days without the air fryer, they requested a meeting to discuss matters, and I asked the resident assistant to mediate. We reside on campus. They initially denied my request, but I managed to get him to attend anyway. Unfortunately for me, my gentle RA brought another RA, not even from our building, who inexplicably sided with my roommates, leading me to give up on sharing my side during the meeting. Now feeling isolated in my room, I chose to eat alone and at one point became so uncomfortable leaving that I resorted to using a trash can and a large Ziploc bag as a makeshift toilet. I was also stressed and depressed about various past events. To illustrate the type of individuals my roommates are, one of them dated a 22-year-old at the beginning of the semester while she was 17, and when I questioned whether he was aware of her age, she hesitated, placed it in her Instagram bio, and remarked, "If he doesn't see it, that's his problem." Elle defended their actions throughout, even though she was the most vocal in the group chat, complaining about the other two's failure to wash dishes or clean, which resulted in a gnat problem. S and L never favored J. I had to persuade them to take her to the beach one weekend, arguing that it would be rude to leave her behind after her recent breakup. J also maintained a rotation of men for financial gain, free items, or football tickets, one of the latter working at a food establishment on campus. She visited his workplace for free tacos, ultimately ending up at his residence, spending the night with him, and bringing him back to our dorm to prepare breakfast. While this behavior may be fine for others, she made jokes about their intimacy in the dorm, including my room, which made me very uncomfortable, especially as someone who identifies as asexual. Eventually, he chose to end their relationship kindly, expressing that he didn't want her to be focused on him during her first year and wishing her well. However, she spent days feigning distress on the living room floor, blasting music from an artist she had only met once and knew for just a few days. It ordinarily wouldn't bother me so much, but they were all aware that my boyfriend of 1 year had just broken up with me, making her exaggerated theatrics for attention extremely aggravating. Additionally, I've gone through 3 large bottles of body wash, and I've noticed that the quantity of Jaytak's body wash hardly seems to decrease, even after an entire semester has passed. She consistently leaves her hair in the drain, and all of them leave hair scattered throughout the living spaces. I began documenting the mess as it became increasingly intolerable. They exhibit severe disrespect and are generally quite filthy. For example, one roommate vacuumed up kimchi and neglected to clean the vacuum afterward, resulting in an awful odor when I eventually used it. One roommate left a considerable bloodstain on our toilet. They would leave food floating in the sink, stack 3 trash bags next to the trash can, and the living room often reeked of unpleasant odors, sometimes resembling urine. Although I do not utilize the common areas or kitchen, I frequently find gnats, ants, and small spiders in those spaces of the dormitory, yet my room remains bug-free. Jay even experienced an infestation of ant-like insects with wings on her bed sheets and near her window. I had also asked for a rule that I be notified whenever a man was in the dormitory. I've repeatedly explained that I am uncomfortable around men, especially with their male friends supplying alcohol. I wondered what type of sane 24-year-old man would befriend a freshly 18-year-old girl. Yet S consistently forgets this to the extent that L has had to inform me. When L wasn't aware either, I would wake up to hear a male voice just outside my door near the bathrooms. I plan to share my experience here and post in the aita subreddit because I genuinely question whether I am in the wrong for distancing myself from them. I feel the need to vent about the distress they have caused me during my first year of living away from home. Story 4. Am I the asshole for confronting my wife's coworker for being rude? This event took place during the summer, but it resurfaced recently, prompting me to seek unbiased perspectives on whether I overstepped my boundaries. There are 3 crucial points I wish to outline for context before I proceed. 1. I am a 30-year-old male who owns my own business. I have been quite fortunate that it is thriving, and I am deeply grateful and appreciative of its growth. 2. My wife, who is 28 years old, works at a well-known corporation, which also happens to be her first job after college, and she was recently promoted to director. She oversees a team and reports directly to the senior director. 3. My wife and I purchased land and had a custom-built forever home completed in the summer of 2023. We participated in every step of the process, from designing the house to selecting the furnishings. The entire journey, from construction to full decoration, spanned a little over a year. We take immense pride in the outcome and enjoy hosting gatherings. Once the house was completed, we organized several events throughout the year. My wife expressed a desire to host a barbecue and pool party during the summer, inviting her colleagues. Since she was inviting a substantial number of them, around 50, we opted to cater food and arrange outdoor activities, such as a bouncy castle, as some would bring their families. Considerable planning and thought went into this, and my wife was delighted to do it. A few days before the event, she provided some background on colleagues I had never met. When she mentioned a person named Dick, a pseudonym, she explained that he had been her former boss, the director of a different department, and had consistently treated her poorly. My wife had been rapidly progressing in her career, which Dick seemed to resent for some reason. Although she began her career in his department, she eventually became a director, thus becoming his equal in terms of position. I inquired why she was inviting someone like him, to which she replied that she didn't want him to feel excluded and worsen their professional relationship. I gathered she wanted to address any issues outside of work hours to see if anything could change. Nevertheless, she requested that I remain on my best behavior around him, even in the event of any sarcastic comments, promising to handle it. I tend to be protective of my wife, given her kindness and tendency to be a source of comfort for others, but I assured her I would do my best. On the day of the gathering, everything went smoothly. Everyone enjoyed themselves at the pool and engaged in backyard games, including the bouncy castle. Dick arrived about 30 minutes late, and I was the one to greet him while my wife attended to other guests. He was pleasant during our initial conversation, but his entire demeanor shifted when my wife approached. It was as if a switch had been flipped. I chose to ignore it, but my wife offered the latecomers a tour of the house. During the tour, Dick made a negative remark about every room we visited. For example, when we showed him the living room, he commented, "The ceilings are too high. Why did you guys do that? It seems pointless." When we reached the guest house in the backyard, he said, "Why did you guys build a guest house? Your home is large enough. It's like you want to show off." He continued to make such comments, making the other guests feel quite uncomfortable. I remained silent at my wife's request, while she nervously laughed and moved the tour along. After the tour concluded, we led everyone to the backyard where the other guests were. Dick stayed and began asking us invasive questions, such as, how much was the house? And who paid for most of it? I expressed my discomfort with sharing such information, and we shifted the conversation. Later on, while eating and chatting with the other guests, the topic of the house arose. Someone complimented the backyard layout and inquired about the designer. My wife shared that we designed everything ourselves. During her explanation, Dick interrupted in a sarcastic tone, saying, "Whoa, be careful not to ask them how much it was. Apparently that's private information only shared among the elite." An uncomfortable silence followed. I had reached my limit at this point. It felt like he was trying to humiliate her for no reason. I interjected, "Is there a problem here? Ever since you arrived, you've been rude." He scoffed and claimed he was merely curious, after which he fell silent. I pressed him further, asking why he needed to know. He did not respond, simply staring at me. I stated, "Next time people are talking, you don't need to involve yourself." Upon hearing this, he launched into a tirade. "I don't know who you think you're addressing like that, but it's odd, and I wanted to know how your wife could afford this house on her salary. There's no way she earns enough for this house. Let me guess, you covered most of it." I interrupted him mid-rant, asserting, "I can speak to you however I choose. I do not work for you, neither does my wife. This is our home, and you do not have the right to disrespect us here. I don't know what issues you have with my wife, but it stops now. By this point, and I'm not proud of it, I moved closer to him and continued. Just because you feel envious of my wife's advancements while you've remained stagnant does not justify your behavior. You need to leave my property before I have to remove you. He looked taken aback, perhaps not expecting me to confront him so directly. He retaliated by insinuating that my wife had slept her way to her position and that she enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle without contributing financially, accusing us of flaunting our wealth. This was the tipping point for me. I grabbed him by his collar and began to drag him out of the house. Upon returning, I found my wife's close colleagues consoling her, while others concluded it was time to depart. Once everyone had finally left, my wife told me I didn't need to defend her in that manner, assuring me she was fully capable of handling herself. She expressed concern that because of my outburst, things would be awkward for her at work. I acknowledged that my actions were not appropriate, but emphasized that Dick had crossed a line. There is only so much I can endure. Overall, she was upset that I didn't heed her single request and allowed one individual to spoil the party, worried about potential workplace repercussions. Furthermore, she was concerned I might be arrested for assault. I reassured her that she had done nothing wrong. She simply turned and walked away, claiming I did not comprehend the intricacies of corporate culture. So, am I the one at fault in this situation?